I hold in my hand the best game controller of all time, the Sega Dreamcast. What do you mean it's not your favorite controller of all time? Okay, we're all gonna have different opinions when it comes to what makes the best game controller of all time. You could take two controllers and show them to your friend and say, hey, take a look at these and tell me which one of these you prefer. And when your friend gives you the answer, ask, okay, now how did you decide that you liked that one? And your friend's probably gonna say, I don't know, it just feels better. I just like it. Well, that's pretty subjective. I wanna get into what you like about controllers, what you require for your controllers. Do you have a favorite? Are you still waiting to get a controller that you like? Do you wish that you could combine certain traits from one controller and another controller and make a perfect one? Do you prefer game pads or fight sticks? Let me know in the comments. It may influence future videos. I'm going to show you some examples of a few in a rapid fire type fashion just to get the ball rolling. And please do leave a comment and let me know what you think. So let's go.
This is the original controller for the Nintendo Entertainment System. How comfortable is it? This is a Sega Genesis 3-button controller. Would you substitute a Genesis controller for a NES controller if you could? Plug a Genesis controller into an original Nintendo. Do you consider the Genesis controller more comfortable to hold? Which of these two has the better D-pad? Which one provides a better tactile response? This is an Atari 5200 controller. Are any of you interested in the 5200? Have you by chance refrained from picking up this system simply because of the controller's reputation for being unreliable? This controller is notorious for both its design and failure rate. It uses an analog stick that does not self-center, and the buttons tend to stop responding over time. The controller has to be rebuilt. I rebuilt mine a few years ago. The aftermarket parts for the buttons are better than the original, but the controller is still plagued by the analog stick's design. For those of you that are longtime fans of Nintendo, do you remember moving from the Super Nintendo's controller to the N64? This was quite a change, and the N64 controller is quite unique even these many years later. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Did it or does it influence your interest in the system? This controller has historically been a bit of a mixed bag. A question for the modern era, Microsoft and Sony controller design philosophy. Should the left thumbstick be located directly next to the right thumbstick, such as with the Sony controller, or should it mirror the location of the face buttons, arguably a much more natural resting position for the thumbs, like in the Xbox family? Has this difference alone caused you to purchase one console over the other? Is it worth comparing their D-pads? Is a D-pad relevant to the games that you play on these systems? What about turbo functionality? Have you ever played a TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine console? Have you ever found yourself wanting turbo on another system? Speaking of turbo, what about the NES Advantage? Lots of people enjoyed this controller back in the day. Did you? It was intended to make it feel like you had an arcade controller at home, but I don't think it even came close. And that brings up the subject of arcade sticks, typically used for fighting games. How many of you use a stick controller in some form? Are you using a stock option? Did you customize any of the parts, or did you happen to build one completely from scratch? Have you found a CDI controller that you like? Have you ever asked yourself, why am I holding a CDI controller? Is the Sega Saturn controller the best gamepad of all time, or would that be the Super Nintendo controller? Did you use a gamepad during the early era of PC platformers, or just stick with a keyboard? Maybe you played all your games with a huge joystick. That might sound odd now, but it was perfectly normal back then. What do you think about the GameCube controller having a large primary button in the middle of the button face? Which cap makes for a better stick? The cap for the control stick, or the one for the C-stick? Did you know this controller has seen a slew of custom modifications since its release, primarily for use with Smash Bros? Modifications such as notching the shroud around the control stick or C-stick so it functions as an external gate of sorts, or shortening the springs behind the trigger buttons to reduce throw distance and make them more responsive. A controller might define a gaming system, but it also serves as your gateway to a game. It is personal. Regardless of a manufacturer's decision as to what controller was bundled with a console and how it was designed, you most likely have your own likes and dislikes. Share them here. Your feedback may influence future videos. Thanks for watching.